I'd like to begin by saying thank you to those people who are assisting me today. Many of you in this room are teachers in your own right, and you do me great honor by attending my class, whether you are my assistant or you are, in your own right, a yoga teacher. I will not pretend even for a moment to understand as much as my teacher does about this subject, but I will give you the best that I can. I'll give you as much as I know. He has dictated to me what he wanted me to teach to you today, and I will follow that as closely as I possibly can. Sit in silence with me. Sit straight and tall. Draw your palms together at chest level. Close your eyes from top to bottom. Take the upper eyelid down towards the lower eyelid and lift the outer side chest up towards the ceiling. Balance the weight equally and evenly across the buttocks. And notice that it reflects, it moves up into the outer side chest at the same rate. That the imbalance of the two buttocks is reflected on the way that those two ribs on the side body do or don't lift. Surrender the shoulders, relax across the face, forehead, neck, throat, tongue, root of the tongue. And keep drawing yourself inward, leaving the external world on the back burner, just where you can get at it, but moving away from. Go inward. Yogena chittasya padena vacham. Malam sharirasya chavaichakena. Yopa karotam pravaram muninam. Patanjalim pranjaliranatusmi. Abahu Purushakaram Shankachakra Siddharinam Sahasra Shirisam Shvetam Pranamami Patanjalim Harihi Om. Bring your head down. Take your hands down, palms up. Raise your head with closed eyes. And then open those eyes. So, this is a group that has a pranayama practice. And by definition, that's how we are in this room together. Having said that, at the same time, we all know that there are gaps in our practice. There are little holes. There are places where we could use a little more understanding. So when Guruji talked to me about what to do with this class, there were a few things that came through, and you heard them all this morning, though you're going to get a slightly different perspective on them this afternoon. And that was, Guruji talked this morning about the temples here. And how that word temple got translated from here to there. Well, one of the other ways that BKS Iyengar talks about temples are it's the place where the electrical impulse from the eye and the ear meet. And that the channel itself is not clear until this area becomes soft and moves in. That if this flakes, moves out, becomes hard, flares, any one of those will cause a disturbance. And that at that point, you'll still be doing the breathing, but you won't really be capable of doing pranayama because you're not inward. Now, having said that, take straight shavasana, lie down, and I'm going to talk you through the head and face. If you need a blanket behind the head, those of you who need something under your legs, all of that, of course, is permissible. I will not treat you like raw beginners. You deserve better treatment than that. Even though we're starting with shavasana as we would with raw beginners. More than just the physique, you have to prepare the mind for this thing we call pranayama. So we all begin by letting go of the arms and legs. And some of us begin to flirt with this action that's close to sleep. But the fact is shavasana should always be a wide awake state. That the interaction between the body and the mind becomes more succinct, more available, more awake. And so you first have to pierce inward for that kind of relaxation that lets go of the facial features and allows the face to become completely expressionless. There's a slight release and a drop of the jaw. There's a surrendering across the forehead. There's a relaxation deep inside of the scalp. And you'll notice that if it's done well and it comes naturally, there's a natural drop-off of the forehead skin from the scalp line towards the brow. And if it doesn't come naturally, and if you try to do it, force it, insist upon it, you'll notice that it hardens those two temples, that area between your outer eye and your ear. And that if you can release your face, if you can let go, then you have to pierce a little bit deeper and start to open the senses, specifically your sense of sight, your sense of hearing. And even though the eyes are closed, the nervine impulses that take place between the inside of your eyelid and the front part of your eyeball will start to describe to you the action or the lack of action in and around your temple. Many of us feel that pulsing or a harshness or a flaring. And each of these feedbacks is a description to you to go inward deeper, to relax more, to seek out an understanding that comes more from the inside than from the out. And if this comes, the eyes relax and the inner eye opens. And if this comes, the inner ear opens. Don't be confused by that word inner ear. Many of us think that there's going to be some sort of a dramatic shift that happens where we can hear better. And in fact, that will become at least mildly the case. But look more to see that there's a softness that takes place away from the outer surface of the ear, counting in towards the center skull, about 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches. That canal, tube, feels like it opens mildly. Not some sudden click, but with a softness that takes place that can sometimes be felt in the jaw, but always can be felt in and around the temples. And some of us begin to notice that the area around the temple almost never lets go. That subtlety that I'm describing is that elusive. Then, slowly, gently, carefully, try to disturb as little as is possible and bend one leg and turn to your side. Use your arms to help you turn to get up. Now, for beginners, that should be much longer. Now, is this the group that was in this room yesterday? Which it shifted. Okay. Then you all need to come a little closer, please. Let me borrow your block. Blanket is fine. One's good. That same sensation, or better, around here, around the temple, should take place when we take the next step, which is to come up onto getting ready for lying down pranayama. So, I've taken a blanket, we call this headstand size, folded in half. I've got two in the exact same way, two done the same fashion. Put one on top of the other, except they're mildly staggered. That one is slightly off. Now, what's this distance? This distance has to do with your spinal column, has to do with your back. You're going to start with your buttocks slightly away from the bottom blankets. And then when you take support here, there should be a separate support that takes place for the sacrum and a different one that takes place for the lumbar. And those of you who are going to use the white blankets, these, you may want to use 3. Take another slight step. For some of us, this distance is 3/4 of an inch. For some of us, it's closer to 1 inch, 1.5 inches. It depends on your body height. It depends on your elasticity, the way that your body does or doesn't let go. And then the extra blanket, or if you don't have a blanket, you can use a brick here, so that the head is slightly higher than the shoulders are slightly higher than that part of the back, and your buttocks is down onto the floor. Watch to see that for some of us who've been doing pranayama for a while, this is more relaxing to the temples, because this center portion here across the chest begins to take air more readily. That as Guruji was talking earlier today about wherever you have the valley, you have a mountain somewhere else, and vice versa, you'll notice that this mountain that comes below begins to get rid of this valley that most of us get when we lie down. And that once that you start to get this, you'll see that the rest of the body, the energy of the rest of the body begins to let go. Now, we're always hesitant, not always. Many of us are hesitant to use this word energy because it's too difficult to describe. But the fact is at some point we have to describe this, because pranayama is the regulation of the energies of the body. Pranayama is the prana, being that energy, that this life force, as we call it, is regulated by the use of these ways that we do. It's not just the breath moving, though the breath is one of the indicators of the body's energy. And again, because we are peers, we are colleagues, you are not beginners. I am not introducing you to pranayama. I can reveal the entire class. And the entire class is going to go from the temples towards the interior. And from that interior, try to describe to you what takes place on the inhalation, the retention, the exhalation. Where are we going to get here today? I'm going to teach you to sit. You've all sat before. I'm going to teach you that kumbhaka, as we call it. And during that kumbhaka, I'm going to pick up on the line that my teacher gave in 10 minutes today and take you on from there. Now, don't be terrified, many of you, thinking the Guruji's coming into this class. He may or may not. The last thing he told to me is no, I am not coming, Manuso. But if his urge comes, he will be here. But do not, he's the boss. This is my teacher, meaning when I tell you specifically that I know that this man knows more about this subject than I do, that this guru is so far beyond, it means that the control of what I consider my yoga class is useless by comparison. So that it's really his yoga class if he chooses to turn it into that. Having said that, I'm following the line that he established with you. You heard the same words I did. You may have translated it slightly differently than I did. I may have had another conversation with him about that than you did. But nonetheless, you and I together should explore this subject from that start point and watch to see how it can progress into this thing that we call pranayama. When you lie down, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to again pierce here. Then, all of you, right where you are, just sit, just for a moment. You can leave your head up, but I'm asking you to close your eyes. Now, take your most subtle quality of your body, not your head, of your body, and follow it as you exhale. Good, then you can open your eyes. Now, watch again. Don't take my word for it. I'm asking you to look on your own. Because pranayama is your energy, not ours. Pranayama is your journey. And so this has to be a reality to you, not something that I force on you in any way. But watch again, and when you exhale, you will feel the body's energy literally come inward. On your out breath, you will follow it until it almost feels like it becomes a line here. Close your eyes and see if that's a reality for you. And then open them. Again, I'm not teaching this as pranayama. I'm teaching this as the beginning of pranayama. And many of you will have that reality. Those of us who can get out of our head, even for a moment, you can literally feel this happening. That's great. Now, here's where it gets a little tough. Because the truth is that has to be the inspiration for your inhalation. That you have to start from here, and then it has to feel like you've caught that line, and then that expansion comes from there. Close your eyes for a minute. I'm not even asking for a deep breath. I'm just asking you to go. Watch the energies. And there's a coming in. And then you touch. And when you start, follow that line and watch its expansion. Don't worry about breathing deeply. Don't worry about your ribs. It's not a ujjayi. Good. Then open. So Guruji was telling me today, he says, Manuso, you have to know that though we print it differently, the beginning of pranayama is always an exhalation. You see, you even read his own book. And he says, everyone starts with an inhalation. Well, it does. But watch inside of you, and you can see, you can use this as your starting point, and then tell yourself that it goes on from here. Now, when you lie in shavasana, and that's what I'm going to call this, shavasana. When you lie in this supported shavasana, you're going to relax. I'll talk to you about your head. We'll go through the face again. And again, I'm not going to do this for the whole class. But like a raw beginner, you have to start to trace the energy. And I'm asking you to begin from there. Not from ujjayi, which again, I promise we'll get to. But we'll watch for a moment and start to see that if you can learn this, that pranayama itself is more of a release than it is a struggle. That there is not a harshness that comes to do this, but that there's a taste that comes that you're quite attracted to. And that when you get that, then you'll start to be able to move it a little to change these energies, you'll find the real control of pranayama is not some sort of a restraint or harshness, but in fact there's a kind of a flow that you first watch and then eventually start to wrangle into where you want it to be. Everybody loosely got that? Okay, I'm sorry if you have to go so backward for some of you, but it always, as a refresher course, this is exactly where many of us need to touch again. That even those of us, watch when you lie down, especially those of you who have a good practice. You'll see that your breath will automatically start to switch on to an old pattern. And I'm asking you not to break that. I'm asking you to at least watch it, to know. So that again, that you understand that why Krishnamacharya, whose name came up this morning, told Iyengar that you can't print the book because these secrets are not something that's easily expressed. I am telling you that though I can describe to you something that goes on in pranayama, that your journey is clearly your own. That when you go to look inward, that you are following your own body's energy, and I'm asking you to do that without crossing those lines into these more formalized breaths that you've been taught. I'm asking you to back off a bit from Ujjayi, to just look. Just look. Come on, everyone. You set up. Make sure you don't touch anyone or anything. I'm going to leave the lights on unless you have an objection to that. If many of you find that you cannot relax, I will turn them off. I'll ask for them to be turned off. Thanks, Alexis. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, you use the IREP if you need it. You use more or less blankets, but I'm asking you to take some support for your back spine. It would be better if you removed your socks. You can turn your head any way that's available to you, any way that you won't touch or interfere with anyone else. Don't make the gap so long that you don't have real support for your lower back. And back your buttocks up just a bit so that you're not directly against that spot. And be careful not to overlift. If you put too many blankets down, it actually aggravates. Not that you'll get a backache, but you'll have an aggravated lower back. Take time, be patient, get it right. Little more distance, Candace. Little more distance. I know you're not long of stature, but believe me, you're going to need, and that's too much, somewhere in between. Garth, either your body has to go lower or your head has to come higher. You may want to just fold that blanket to increase the height under your skull. Then relax. Start the way we all do. Relax your arms and legs. The flow of the buttocks and legs should be away from the torso. The flow of the arms should feel like it drops away from the shoulders. They go to a state of relaxation. And look to see. Many of you will notice in an instant that if you got any ground that came out of the last Shavasana, that the area around the brow and the temple, there are some of us that find this one more relaxing, but there are a few of us that find it more aggravating. If you find that the temples are pulsing or gripped or hard or aggravated, be suspicious that the blanket behind your head is misplaced. It may need to be readjusted. But that has to be your job, because we can't get to all of you, and some of it can't be seen from the outside. Not by me, anyway. The eyes should once again sink in, feeling almost like they're coming slightly away from the eyelid. The forehead relaxes, softens. The brain itself should almost feel like it withdraws away from the ceiling, away from that front forehead. The tongue releases, the root of the tongue surrenders, becomes slightly wider, but not so thick that it blocks the throat. The area around the temple has to be one of the places that you regularly visit. Has to be of concern to you constantly. Because a disturbance here, when we start to do the real deep breathing, when we go after the kumbhakas and the ujjayis, means that there's a strain and that the nerves aren't getting what pranayama should be about, the regulation of the energies of the body. Now you'll see that the elevation that's been given to your back allows for a freedom in the chest, allows for an elasticity of breath, and, as I mentioned before, many of us get into this position and instantly begin some sort of a pranayama practice. I'm asking you to keep that to its most bare minimum so that you're really only tracing the breath at first. Nita, her head's crooked in the blue. And that, as we begin to pierce from the outside in, start following your own exhalations. And many of you in here who teach know that this is exactly where we begin with our raw students. And yes, the quality of air is very different up here. And this is even more important today, that you don't strain to do this. And that once you have learned how that exhalation goes, see if you can maintain your understanding of that thinning of sensation where everything came closer into that, what I described as a line. And watch to see if you can get a softness as that line goes out, as that inhalation begins. Don't do deep breathing yet. Because if you can learn to do this, you'll see that there's a natural quality, that there is its own kind of pranayama that begins almost just with you as a witness rather than a doer. Breathe only out of the nose and don't suck the air through the sinuses. And some of you will already notice that even though I've moved only so far, first I brought you to the exhalation, now I'm only asking you to watch the inhalation. And again, I'm not treating you as beginners, that's why I'm moving a little faster. Many of you will notice already that the temples have become more gripped, more hard, or that there's a pulsing, an electrical impulse that can be felt just outside of the eye. Watch, observe, go in. And if you find that I'm too fast for you, or it may only have to do with today, you have to go back to see if you can find that exhalation. See if you can experience what you did sitting upright. Notice that I didn't make it some formalized how to exactly sit. I promise we'll do that. But when we did that, many of you could feel that bringing in of the energy of the body. And now start to see what it does, even though the chest is lifted, pushed up from the spine. And if you move too quickly, then pranayama becomes physical, meaning it really won't work for you. And it's always better to go more slowly, more with peace, more with subtlety when it comes to this subject. Many of you will also notice that even with the teacher barely mentioning the word inhalation, that the limbs withdraw or pull back or come away from the real shavasana, where the arms and legs should flow away from the torso. That the willpower tries to step in more quickly and more readily than it should. And many of you have learned that you can relax a little bit better by elongating your exhalations. So go ahead and do that, ever so slightly. Don't lose that thread. Because if you push out a little bit too much breath, you'll see that that line is in fact lost. You don't really gain by force. So you're slightly out-breathing, you're slightly exhaling a little more and a little deeper without losing the softness of the temples and maintaining that thread and understanding of softness, subtlety, awakeness. And that as we had a description this morning of the multi-count cloths, or those of us who start to know about these sheets that have this many threads and fibers, etc., can you find yourself into a more subtle and more relaxed and deeper count? Not numbers, not how long it takes, but with a finer tuned kind of understanding of that out-breath. And again, you'll see that in lying down pranayama, that the more relaxed you become, that the more appreciation you have of these subtle changes. Now, if you caught some of what I caught in this morning's asana class, you'll see that much of what Guruji teaches, he's asking you to find what the body will do naturally and then help that naturalness to its next state. Whether it's the armpit in Ardha Chandrasana or some of the other things that we did, watch to see that if you can find this exhalation, that the body releases more, that the nervine impulses become more subtle. And in that naturalness, you'll start to again see that the inhalations get a little deeper. And the other thing that you will notice is that the inhalations begin from the bottom of the ribs. That eventually when we do Ujjayi, it comes from that natural beginning state, where the first part of the intake comes where the floating ribs, false ribs as they may be called, begin an activity that allows the breath to come inward. Don't breathe fast. Don't suck in hard. And if you can now make the transition from the deeper out breaths to start to follow that in breath, not even necessarily deepening it, but following it, you'll start to see that that line that you could feel coming in, that perspective change that brought and came closer to the core of the being, can also be traced on the inhalation on the way out without tightness, without even starting deep breathing, the breath has a natural kind of action that allows it to be deeper. Chris, can you help her? Thank you. You're not sucking the breath through the nose. You're not hardening the area of the torso to make this happen. You're tracing, allowing, releasing to make this happen. And those of us who have an Ujjayi understanding, at whatever level we are, you'll see that the initial ways that we teach Ujjayi start right from where you are now. That your teacher clearly has started inside of yourself. Now, give it a moment. I'm going to tell you to roll sideways, but never do this quickly. Many of you know that you're waiting for me to start to tell you to bend one leg and turn. But look to see that the nerves make that transition so that there's no harshness in that turn. Bend one leg. Roll over onto your side. Stay there for a moment. It's best if you don't lift or shift the hips to make that turn. You push and just roll. Turn towards the floor. Push off with your left hand. Come up. Please come closer. So one of the explanations that you and I got this morning came from the action of the anterior and posterior. The anterior is the front. Posterior is the back. When we go to sit, the front of the spine should take the initiative. The front of the spine should be the major lift. The front of the spine should have the most activity. Now, what happens with most of us? Truth. We tend to pull here from a strengthening process and tip. We harshen. I know that's not really a great word, but we become harsh on the inside, and we get a grip here. And the words we got this morning were that this is, in fact, why you tire so quickly. And there's a truth to that. Many of you know that. We sit for a few minutes in pranayama, and oh, no, please, my body really won't do it. And at first you think that there's an aggravation that's come to the nerves. But then after a while you realize you're tired, but there's something else going. It's not that the muscles don't do it. It's just that the alignment just isn't quite perfect. So, the bones that we sit on are the sits bones, they're the ischials, they're the buttock bones, whatever. When we go to sit, it's like a knuckle. You shouldn't be on the front or the back. Now, from the front, I'll show you. When I go to move the same way I just showed from the back, that harshness that I showed, it rolls inward, and it'll be quite obvious to you. It rolls me to the front of my sits bones. And of course, we get the illusion that more air is going to come in across here, because I can feel that stretch. Right? I'm not pretending that it's not a stretch. Many of us believe somehow that if it's more like a back bend, that the chest is in fact open. But there's something much more subtle to this that I'm going to ask you to experiment with. And that is when you go to sit on that center sits bone. Guruji had actually told me this morning he had to finish with Paschimottanasana because he had to describe to you pranayama. He knew full well coming in, he wanted the last 5 or 10 minutes to to lecture you on the nature of pranayama, and that action where he had you roll to find that sits bone, to make that turn, to awaken that spot, to change from the pumpkin towards the cucumber. You know that one, right? This is review now. This is only a few hours old. In that action, there's an awakeness that comes to the base of the torso. And in that base of the torso, you'll see that the aggressive character, our aggressive characters, start to bring us to that front rim of that pelvic bone, or those sits bones, excuse me. And in that you actually start to rob yourself of your prana, which is invested here in the front rim of the spine. That the supporter has to start from the bottom and move towards the top, and that the supporter comes right around here, the tailbone. So the description goes, what we pretend is normal, still believing in my own heart of hearts that there's no such thing, that there's a neck curve that goes this way, there's a thorax curve that goes this way, there's a lumbar curve that goes this way, and that the tailbone does this. When you go back to sit, at first I'm not going to be interested at all in the deep breathing. We'll get there. I'm going to be more interested in the seat, the stance, your asana, if you will. And as you sit here, you're going to find that center point, that middle portion of the sits bone. And then I'm going to ask you that as you sit, you're going to be told to take the anterior tailbone towards the posterior tailbone. Very simple out of my mouth. Really easy thing to do. But when you take that action, watch to see how it ripples up your entire body. The spine, of course, but you'll feel the entire torso has to find a new way to be. And that for those of us who've been overworking the back to try to sit, you'll find that it puts you in a state of struggle between that tailbone action and that lumbosacral action. And having said what I did, that the anterior tailbone goes back, you'll watch to see that suddenly it robs you of that feeling of trying to come forward, and it robs you of the place where most of you have tried to find strength. You understand in theory what I said? Now go back, I'll start again. Virtually just repetition of what I just went over. Take elevation under the hips, buttocks. At first, don't even take the head down. Now, some simple specifics. Don't drag the feet way in against the blanket. Notice, if you will, on one foot, the tendency will be to be right on that foot bone. It's actually a metatarsal, but without teaching anatomy. On one side, this will be sharp on the floor. On the other side, watch, there's a turn, that the ankle stretches a bit more. The side that you're more turned, the side where the outer ankle is stretched more, is the correct side. The other side, what some of us tend to do, is harshen that foot and sharpen that angle. And as we push there, it actually hardens the body. So watch my hands. Hopefully you can see. I'm using my hands, and my thumbs push the big toe mound in, and my fingers pull that outer foot out. Try. One foot's going to react ill to that. Then, rest your hands for now. I'm well aware of the fact that finally the palms should go up. Not today. Just rest the palms downward. And then sit up straight and tall. And you'll notice that in that first instant, already the pelvis attempts to shift. So, look inside, and first, before you even begin the tailbone, maybe I went too fast with that, before you begin the tailbone, find the middle of the knuckle that I'm calling that bottom sits bone, the buttock bones. And you'll see the dead center is tricky. If you don't believe me, lift your chest as much as is possible, and many of you will see you shift instantly to the front. So balancing the right and left sits bone, balancing the front and back sits bone. Again, really easy for me to say, very difficult to do. Start to pierce right down to the very bottom of your spine. And take your anterior tailbone towards your posterior tailbone. It's easier to move your lumbar, so that will come faster for some of you. But that's not what I'm asking you to do. Don't move your lower back. Move the tailbone. Now, there's a tickling here, and don't be confused. It is not a harshness, but you'll see that it has the root of what will eventually become Mula Bandha, eventually become Uddiyana Bandha. That the awakeness has come from that low in the spine. Now, lift your outer side chest. Notice that the tailbone tries to react. I have to give a moment because, it has to come from your insides. You have to watch. Close the eyes. Head still up. Upper eyelid drops to the lower eyelid. Are you very accurately on that middle buttock bone? And then is it the same on right and left? And as you mildly pull backward from the anterior tailbone to the posterior tailbone, now the rest of the vertebrae of the body have to stack up with one another. Don't do deep breathing. And if you move too much, you come off of that middle tailbone, middle portion of the buttock bones, and you become too tight across the abdomen. And if you don't move, you'll find your way back onto the front of those two ischials. And then from there, we'll start just where we started before. Watch one exhalation. And you'll notice that coming inward happens again, and it's even stronger. Don't collapse the chest. Don't fall or change the position of the pelvis. But allow for awakening. And then open the eyes once again. What happens with most of us is when we start a pranayama practice, we go at it as if it was another variation of asana, where we start to think that if we move a little harder or a little more, that something really great will happen. If you overwork in this, trouble begins. This is actually where almost all trouble in pranayama begins. Now, watch again. Sit on the front of your sits bone. Do the front of the sits bone, exactly what I told you not to do for a moment. Now, don't move from there, and then exhale. Good. Now, open your eyes. Now, find the middle of those two sits bones. Find that area and take that mild action in the coccyx and move from the anterior towards the posterior. Close your eyes once again. And then exhale once again. And then open your eyes. Now, the description that I will give you is when I'm even mildly on the front of those two bones, I am trying from the outside to make something happen on the inside. If I do it the other way, if I can make that anterior tailbone move to the posterior tailbone, if I can find the center of that sits bone, then the next thing that happens is that I am generating the breath from the inside out rather than the outside in. Take a moment, try it on your own again. Again, I need for some of you to start to taste this, because when you do, the attraction of what pranayama is will never leave you. And a mild shift in the way that your spinal column sits makes all the difference in the world. And then open the eyes. Now, you've been taught to sit. So, I'm not going to ask you to harshly push the chest into the chin or vice versa, but the head must be down. There's no question that the head has to be down, otherwise pressure comes in the head. And when you go to take your inhalation, whether it's just a deep breath or an ujjayi breath, again, is not worth an argument. But when you go inward from there, I want you to keep your mind on that front spine. That anterior spine, beginning from the tailbone, stacking all the way up, should be where your breath comes from. Now, just watch and listen. The breath comes in the nose. Sound comes from here. Again, old descriptions for many of you. But the real action has to happen in the way that I'm sitting. That center sits bone, and I have to keep judging where I am on that sits bone and how my tailbone is moving. Now, is that the deepest breath that I could do? And the answer is no. The willpower can be invested in this. Now watch. This one requires an eye. If you can see, great. If you can't, come closer. I don't mind either way. But watch again. I'm purposefully not taking my shirt off, not just to keep the mic on, but to also destroy my reputation. But I'm also trying to let some of you see that there's an expression that the cloth itself will change. Watch. You'll see a deeper breath. But the head's become hot. The temples have become gripped. The pulsing inside of me says, Manuso, don't you realize you're at 8,000 feet? That you have to be very cautious with this? But I have to be careful because I have a big ego, and the ego says a longer breath is clearly what pranayama is, and it isn't. But as I keep watching, as I keep moving back inward, as I pay attention to the spine, there's a natural deep breath that I can find rather than do. And once you get that, you'll start to realize why the yogis didn't, it's not about the cautions, but why the yogis kept insisting that you do it correctly. That the warnings about pranayama were not just in terms of, it's going to mess your nervous system up, but that you'll never understand what it is. That the mystery of it will continue to be a mystery. And instead of trying to see if you can do a 1-minute inhalation or hold your breath for so long, you want to see if you can taste that kind of naturalness that comes from here. Now, we're not going to do a lot of this. And yes, you're still going to find that there's a naturalness where the ribs move here, that the breath begins here. And that if you can keep your mind where I'm asking you, and then experiment with where your tailbone and your sits bones are, and that you can find a way to stack those vertebrae one on top of another, you again may find that you're not taking as deep a breath as you like, but you're also going to see that it's really quite natural, that there's nothing forceful about this, that the naturalness is so much, all that you have to do is encourage it to go a little bit more, and you'll still find that the nerves, for some of us, I'm more relaxed on certain days, I can't say this every day, in this, doing this, than I am lying down for Shavasana. The Shavasana is in its own way elusive to me because this one lets me touch the nerve a little closer. Whereas Shavasana, I feel like I'm fumbling around in the dark. In this one, the nerve is literally coming, saying, hey, look at me. Pay attention, Manuso. Don't be so mean to me. Don't be so harsh. Sit, please. Yeah. Front, no, I'm not asking you to stick the butt out. I'm asking you to take the sensation that stays on the front. I'm doing it this way because this is the way I'm sitting. Everybody? So I'm not talking about you now. I'm talking about me. You see, this is the turn of my tailbone. You see? The tip. So I'm not talking about the tip. I'm talking about here. And I'm asking you to take, I'm going to call it the energy, I call it the prana. Again, you put your word on here if you want. I'm asking you to find this sensation and move it. I should move it this way. You should move it that way. But again, I have to give where you are. You're facing me. Your tailbone is doing this. And yes, I know some of you are off to one side and cracked and etc. But here, this should feel not like you're turning your tip of your tailbone up. I'm asking you to take the energy of the base of the front of your spine and move it. Now, how much are we talking? A fingernail, an eighth, a 16th of an inch. You'll find the right distance. But I'm asking you, because what is the right distance? The right distance is the one that makes you find the center of the sits bones, buttock bones, even on the money. And again, for a moment, take your back tailbone in. In. Do the opposite of what I say. Take the posterior to the anterior. You'll feel the pelvis shifts. Right? You're off of that. Now, take the other one back. And then for a moment, just because this is the way a lot of us work, go too much. You're on the back of it. Your abdomen's gone completely hard. Your lower back feels like it's pushed way back. Find it perfectly. What was Guruji's description this morning? How does one go into forward bends? Not from the head, from the ribs, right? Okay? So from here, touch that spot, which we did this morning with the roll, right? You were in front of that area. I know where we were. And then from there, take the side rib up. Not the back rib forward, not the front rib backward. Take the side rib up. Then, close your eyes. At the end of an exhalation, lift the chest up, take the head down. Relaxing the shoulders. Head has to go down. Those of you that are assisting me, all I ask is, don't force their head down. Ask them to get their head down. Pierce the spine first. I'm asking you to take the position. The asana is more important at first. And with your eyes closed, your inner eye has to watch the two sits bones. The two sits bones are neither forward nor back, right nor left. And the anterior tailbone comes back to touch the posterior tailbone. Then, now, find a slightly deeper breath. Find a breath that comes from this position. And as it draws in, rolls out, you'll see that the attention comes away from the front rib and strangely enough comes away from the diaphragm and starts to awaken those side ribs. Slow and steady out of the nose. Nothing too harsh, nothing hard. Tongue releases, drops to the bottom of the mouth. If you have to choose between doing the breath and doing the asana, please take the position. Take the asana. It will teach you this breath. And look inside and you will see that very clearly that the way that you're piercing, that awakeness that comes in the nerves does not come from your head. That the breath itself will give you the impression that it's generated by the way that the spine is. It's not a squeeze of the shoulder. It's not a hard lift of the outer side chest. But there's an opening that you can feel in the intercostal muscles. Those are the muscles between the ribs. And that there's a softness of the breath that can be attained by watching the action of the interaction between the tailbone and those two sits bones. And if you find that you get that pulsing or harshness or gripping or tightness around the temple, you're overdoing. That the action that eventually becomes this ujjayi is not something that's dictated to you, but is formed out of your own understandings, and that the way that the body has its own kind of naturalness, has its own kind of flare, sensation, feeling. If you need to take regular breaths in between, of course do it. But see if you can do it without losing the thread of the position. That mind looking at the skeletal system has become so important to you. And then trace what it teaches you much more than what I teach you or am pretending to teach you. And you'll find again that every exhalation brings you into that perspective where it comes closer to the core of you. And every inhalation draws outward, learns, teaches from that line, from that small point, from that area close to the front spine. Now I'm in the chest now, not in the tailbone. And that opening that draws across there, again, has its own kind of flare, opening, feeling to it. Go back to normal breathing. And raise the head. Now, I don't know whether to call you in or stay there, but wherever you can see from, this one's going to get a bit more. Now we have to move to Kumbhaka. So, this morning, whether you want to call it Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwar, which is the way Guruji described it, that G-O-D, generates, organizes, destroys. That was the word he backed off on. But it was implied, right? Something has to give way for something new to be created. And this was the description this morning. So the breath comes in, and then you hold it for a moment, Kumbhaka, and then it generates. And then the exhalation comes. Okay? So we're going to go through that. Now, today's intake, most of you already have that thread established. But I want to watch a little bit more, not so much on the Kumbhaka as to how long you hold, but to whether you can really make it feel like you're using it as that organizer. How much breath is here? How much breath is there? What am I really doing? How hard does it become? How soft can I make this? Again, not counting how many numbers you can go by. It's not going to be one of these 64 of this and 20 of this, as Guruji described it. But it's going to be more of, can I organize the way that the content and the container come towards each other? Yeah. The description I want you to follow along with, because it's obvious when you do it, but it's rather difficult to describe. The place that I can feel, I fill up from the inside. I am making like I have a elastic container, like you would blow up a balloon or take a plastic bag and fill it with anything, water, etc. And then it begins to fill out. Now, after a while, there's the touch point of where the water is on the inside of that container. The content and the container are against one another. And the place that it's most obvious in this is here. The container is what I consider to be myself. The content in this case is energy, prana. Not just air. Again, we have to back off from that. For raw beginners, talk to them about air. For those of us practicing, you'll realize very quickly it has nothing to do with air. That air is only the medium that allows me to watch the way that my energy moves. From here, I will fill, and then when I get to that Kumbhaka, I can feel right here, on the top part of the breast, up against, as if it was something else that was material, it would be against this material that I filled. And then I have to find out when, as long as the content and the container are in contact with each other, I'm in a good kumbhaka. But there's a feeling where you'll start to feel that the inside draws away. That literally, that in layers, that there's a pullback. And that in that pullback, that means that that kumbhaka is done. Not that I can't hold the breath longer than that, but that the filling, in fact, has been telling me from my insides, you are finished, Manutho. Beyond here, you're doing with your willpower. And that if I can stop before I get to that, the nerves will say that's a good kumbhaka. That you, in fact, did not hurt yourself, that you are not aggravating the nerves. And it's not that it's so subtle that many of you will almost feel like you didn't notice it at first. That clearly it's not something that's a reality. Now, again, not much to demonstrate. Because it's not my chest against my t-shirt. It's the layer of the inside against the back part of my skin. And though I relate to this as me, there's this front part of the skin that you and I can touch. Then there's the other side, and that's where I'm touching the prana from the inside, and the feeling comes here. It also comes here, but this one's more complex for some of us. It can be taught from here. This class could be taught from the top portion of the sternum. But I'm coming from here because it's easier to find. Again, content and container, that's all I'm looking at. Begins with an exhalation. Was that the longest I could make it? No. Was that the deepest I could make it? No. But watch what happens. I'm going to cross that line, and I'm asking you not to make the mistake that I'm going to make. You're going to see. Instead of letting go, I'm going to say, okay, you want to hold longer than this. There's people watching you here. For goodness sakes, show them a real kumbhaka here. And you'll see what I do. What I will do is throw away the position to try to force the inside against the container. And that once I've done that, I'm lost. Once I've done that, then the nerves will actually start to aggravate. And those of you on the sides, you'll easily see that my temples will begin to become hard. And it happens in an instant, but it happens the instant after this drop-off comes. This is why this indicator has to be used before this one. From here, you're already causing the problem. From here, it's telling you, now, be careful. The next, back off. Too much. Instead of letting go. Then the pelvis tips, hardness comes in the face, the insides start to go, and then the panic comes. And this is one of those things that it's like going for food that you're really crazy over. Really crazy over. And you want to go and the taste keeps saying, do this and do this and do, just keep shoving it in there. Because the pranayama gets like that. And then there's another part that says, I think I've had enough right now. Let me have this today. And then I won't feel like I suffer for it tomorrow. That I can really, because after a while, any one of us knows this. Really, you know this. After a while, the taste is gone. It's not what it was the first few bites. And the pranayama has to get like this, where you have that kind of subtlety to say, you know what? The flavor is gone. Now I have to back off just a little. All right? Go sit, please. Phases. Okay. Have a seat. Someone asked me to go over a bit of Guruji's speech. I wish I had his poetry. I'm looking at an old friend of mine. Felicity and I go back years and years. And ask her after class if you'd like. But Guruji would teach us technique in the first few times that he would teach us pranayama. There was no question about it. You're going to move your ribs, you're going to lift your spine, you're going to take from here. By the time we would get to a 5th, 6th, 8th, 10th session with him of pranayama, it was almost no technique at all. It was only some philosophy, and then it was just poetry. And then it was just, but it became so subtle that I couldn't follow it in my early years. Honestly. I was going to myself, how could he even call this a pranayama class? He didn't even talk about breath. Until I really started to realize where he was going. Now, what was he saying? Again, I can't do it justice. But the inspiration is exactly what he called it. The G, that drawing in, that thing that creates. And then the stopping is the organizer. You'll actually get a taste of it in this. Some of you will start to see one side drops off quicker than the other. I can fill to the top on one side much more readily than I can on the other. I wonder, I'm suspicious, it may have to do with my 2 sits bones being uneven. But I'll figure it out one day. And then the exhalation comes. And for beginners, an exhalation is just strictly, I'm starting all over again. I get another shot at this. But to those of us who are trying to get a pranayama practice with some sort of subtlety, we really are letting go of toxins. In other words, it's not the destroyer in the sense that anything really gets burdened. What am I doing? I'm shoving off things that I don't need anymore. I am divesting myself of that which is, in fact, no longer serving me. And then I make room with that. That was the other part that many of you probably could or couldn't follow. Did you notice what he was talking about when you have a full cup? Full cup is useless. And then he began to go, he used a very interesting description. Guruji said, you take the cup and you put it in water. In other words, he didn't say fill it with water. He said put it in water. What happens when you put it in water? Something has to go away. You're emptying something to fill it. And then, when I empty that water, I'm again filling it with air. Although it's not so obvious, we know that this is in fact happening. What's going on inside of me? Don't write. Don't write. This is why you're getting in trouble. Try to actually absorb for a minute. Because again, it's not the way that we can teach, the physiology of how this turns. You have to start to get it from an inside understanding. Yoga is experiential. Whether Guruji was talking about sorrows or these pains that start to come, you understand that it's experiential. This is why this subject is so difficult to really be given in a scientific kind of understanding. It's not that we can't prove that people's backs get better and knees. But many of us who have a practice, we're so far beyond that. We are more looking towards that understanding of the self which cannot be described. Read in Guruji's new book, there's something quite fascinating. When he starts to talk about samadhi, and he begins to talk about this experience, again, describe to me what sleep is. How many times have you done it? It's a common experience. Give me a few words of what sleep is. And the answer is, you can talk to me about closing your eyes and barely moving, and the breath change. There's no description for it. When it comes to pranayama, at its most subtle state, I'm not talking about, yes, you can talk to people about upliftment, about energy vibration. You can do all of that. But notice at its most deepest level, it is indescribable. It's experiential. It is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge, we talk. We trade knowledge. Wisdom, you have. This is why your pranayama practice is yours. It's not the pranayama practice that someone taught you. It's yours. It belongs to you. It always was yours. And it's only yours when it changes from that shift from knowledge to wisdom. And once you start to get that, you'll start to see how very slippery it is to try to talk to somebody about it, but how very powerful it is on the inside. Sit. Balance. The sits bone is neither forward nor back. Take that anterior tailbone towards the posterior tailbone. Close your eyes from top to bottom. Notice that even when the eyes close, some of us disturb. Take the outer side rib up towards the ceiling, not by lifting the shoulders, not by hardening the trapezius. Exhale. And at the end of the exhalation, when you're empty, bring the head down. Please try to stay with me. I'm going to go very slow, but I'm asking you to bear with me. It requires patience. When the head went down, the tailbone is disturbed. So it takes an extra second. The sits bones are disturbed. Now take normal breaths at first, but take normal breaths with the appreciation of what the asana position has done for you. Now again, just do deep breathing at first. We're not going to do a lot of kumbhakas, but we're going to do a few. So take a slow, deep, smooth inhalation. Follow it with a slow, deep, smooth exhalation. And again, it should be the asana that you're looking for. Where is my sits bone? Where is my coccyx? How is my tailbone operating? And again, don't be fooled by moving the large muscles of the abdomen or the lower back, what we call the lumbar. Really look to the base of your spine and let the front of your spine come to a state of awakeness from there. Continue with deep breathing without strain. If it comes to a strain, better to go back to normal breathing and work on the position. Now, having established that rhythm, start to watch your upper chest, below the collarbone, above the nipple, on that top rim of the breast. Watch the end of an inhalation. Don't hold it. Just watch it. Just put your brain right there. And more importantly, put your mind there. And then exhale. And you'll again start to feel that when you come to the end of your inhalation, that area fills. That area, you can feel the layer that I talk about, where the content has come up against the container. Don't hold the breath yet. Softness in the temple, adjustment in the two side sits bones, adjustment on the tailbone. Anterior spine awake. Then, all of you try to catch up with me. Now we're going to take the inhalation. Start now. Now, I'm not going to tell you when to exhale. Hold the breath when you're full. If you're not full, you go on with yours. Hold the breath when you're full. Keep your awareness on that top breast. And when you feel the content come away, when you feel like you've separated the layer just below the skin, that kumbhaka is in fact over. And then slowly exhale. Now the first breath after is just a recovery breath. And then see if you can again pick up that deeper breathing, that ujjayi type breathing. Again, observing the two sits bones. Living in that anterior tailbone. And softening across the temples. Skin should move from the chest over the shoulder down the back. Don't harden the throat. The blonde, her head's so far down that her chest is closed. She's overrolled her rib forward. Her front diaphragm is hard. Then follow with me again. Begin your exhalation. Then join me. Inhale. When you touch that top, hold the breath there. Don't take the most breath in. And again, feel. It's not going to be some huge switch that goes off. But you're going to feel that it drops away mildly. Even that 16th of an inch that it drops, that's enough to indicate to you that the nerves are going to be bothered if you go further. Then you exhale. Then again, the first breath. When you're first learning, it's not an ujjayi breath right away. The first breath afterward is just a catch-up breath. There's an allowance that takes place. Good. Then raise your head. Open your eyes. Could you feel this? Be honest. And here's the thing. I know that I'm also teaching people who are teaching pranayama. When you go to introduce pranayama to anyone, always back them way up away from that harshness. We're going to do a couple of more. But I didn't want to do so many in a row, especially if I wasn't getting through to you. I have to know that some of you are getting this. And many of you have to know that many of us are looking for this like something in asana where there's some huge shift that takes place so we know we are in fact done or that something else has to that doesn't happen in pranayama. This is why you have to begin from your most subtle nervous system. That you have to be in there where that fine cloth, as Guruji was describing it this morning, that you could feel the difference between a 400 count and a 600 count sheet. That you're well aware of it. Because that's the only way that you can find this spot and really understand it. Because it's not some huge, where if I was going to over-demonstrate it to you, I would do this. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do that at all. The outside frame looks the same. It's the inside frame that there's this drop-off that comes, and once that comes, it almost, there's a part of us that is disturbed to give that breath up. Saying, I know I can do more. I know I can do more. And then after a while, you'll start to realize that you can hold that frame a little better, a little bigger, and then you'll notice what it's like to do a kumbhaka that does not have that nervine interruption, that upset that many of us have been living with if we overdo this. Bring your head down again. We're going to take just a few more. I'm going to end on time. I see somebody watching their watch. Head down. Eyes closed, head down. You know the rest of it. Again, I'm not teaching raw beginners. Rest your hands. I'm asking you to turn the palms down today because the truth is you'll actually feel the upper chest more readily if the palms are down. Eyes closed. Now you begin your deep breathing. Head down. Please, those of you helping, get their heads to stay down. Now again, the beginning and the end of the breath are really up to you, but I'm going to try to get us all in rhythm. Everyone exhale. Then inhale. Don't go fast, don't go harsh, don't even go all the way full. When you feel that lift, where you have drawn the inner layers up against that top breast, stay there. And when that drops off, when that layer peels back, that kumbhaka is over and the exhalation should begin. Then you establish and go back to deep breathing when you can. Still with the position, still with the action. Because if you don't get the base of the body, if you don't get the asana, the rest of this doesn't really add up. Because you'll overinflate, you'll push the rib too hard. Then everybody, stay with me again. Exhale. Then inhale. Slowly. You're not in a hurry to get anywhere, except to enlightenment. Then wait there with the upper outer chest full. And when you feel that there's a pullback, then tell yourself, I respect that, and then exhale with it. It's the beginning of the exhalation that most of us fail to recognize. Now, to take Guruji's words, which I can't do justice to, stay with it. Everyone exhale. Now imagine that you're taking in something so precious that you would call it God. And with that respect, take it in slowly so that you can savor it, understand it, and not be harmed by it. Then when you go to hold the breath, don't hold the breath. Ask it to stay. Invite it. And then realize that after a while it will do you damage because you can't take the full fury of what might be God. And then as you exhale, still savor it, not letting it fall, knowing that it's done you justice, and treat it so well that it'd be willing to come back and join you again. Raise your head. Keep the eyes closed. Raise your head. Wait there. Savor that experience just for a moment. Not doing the breath now. Just being. Not doing. Then, Shavasana. Now wait. Instead of flat Shavasana, which is a very, very good way to do it, after pranayama, sometimes practice where you keep that folded blanket in half, put it where it gives support to the sternum from the backside, and then another blanket behind the head. Like so. Because this will drop for most of us, and that indentation is actually aggravating. So the bottom of the shoulder is going to get caught by a blanket. Nothing too thick. Nothing too thick. Just lie down for a few moments. Don't play with the breath. Close the eyes from top to bottom. Try to find the shavasana that truly brings relaxation. A pranayama that allows a shavasana that allows that pranayama to settle in, where the nerves remain in that soft state. Once again, at least observing to see if the temples have given you a sense of softness. Most of you should not have your upper arm on that same blanket. Either go out to the side, I know you may not have room, or come around under it with the upper arm. And go inward where you're really trying to get the self to seek the self. That we come down out of our head, start to live out of the center portion, out of the seat of the self, which is in the chest. He's puffed up too much, Kathy. This one here in the pink, that cinnamon color. Gray blanket on his thighs. Go in line with the camera straight out. Keep coming and then go back 2 rows. Right there. That's too much. He's rolled it and pushed it too hard to his chest. Yeah. Now you want to take away as much of that state as you possibly can. And with that in mind, don't open the eyes to try to come to an instant awareness or to an instant state where you move on from here. Slowly open the eyes with some state of reverence and understanding. When you're ready, bend your left leg, roll to your side.